Hi, welcome to North of 48. We are at day 783 of the Ukraine invasion, and Ann Lee's got a column in the Daily Costs entitled Russian Military is Leveraging Delays in U.S. Military Support. And we're at 192 days of the Israel conflict, which is now drug into Iran. Or were they part of it to begin with? We don't know. But our guest today is Paul J. He's in the house. Paul is a journalist, filmmaker, founder, editor-in-chief, and host of theAnalysis-news, which you can find on YouTube. Hi, Paul. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for inviting me.
What are your thoughts about the Middle East right now? Is there an end game there? I know what Iran's solution is as an end game, but do you think things will calm down, or do you think it's going to ratchet up?
Well, I'm not sure what you think the end game for Iran is. The end game for the Iranian theocracy is pretty much the same as the end game of the Israeli theocracy / political economic elites, which is stay in power. Then they have the specificity. The agenda for the Israeli state and elites, especially this government, but not only, it's pretty much every government they've had and might have, is to maintain the supremacy of the Jewish state and to force the Palestinians into an unlivable situation. They still hope that the Palestinians in the West Bank will end up in Jordan. They still hope that the Palestinians in Gaza will somehow be absorbed into Egypt. And in the meantime, they'll make life as absolutely unbearable for these people as they can. It's obvious to anyone that looks at the situation. In fact, even Prime Minister Omar, former Prime Minister, said this. Hamas is to a large extent the actual creation of Israel. Israel had chances to negotiate with Fatah and others. There was quite a few, several important other organizations that were
PLO, yeah,
that were progressive. Some of them were socialists, and they would have created a perspective for a whole different kind of Palestine. And that is the last thing the Israeli elites wanted. And so instead of having any kind of serious negotiations, they nurtured, and Omar says even financed through Qatar, that Netanyahu actually sent money to Hamas over the years. They wanted a kind of an extreme Islamic organization on the other side that, at least in their documents, say they wanted the extinction of Israel because it meant they didn't have to negotiate with anybody. And they thought every few years they could bomb the hell out of the place, not as badly as this, but they have that phrase, mowing the grass.
Yeah.
So often you bomb civilians in Gaza, and generally with an illegal siege, prohibit Gaza from any kind of normal economic development. And I used to, you mentioned I had the show Counterspin.
Yes.
So I once had a debate between Yuri Dan and Robert Fisk. Well, Fisk is well known as one of the, he's passed away recently, but he was one of the best of the independent journalists. In fact, he wrote for the British newspaper, The Independent, covering Middle East for years. And I arranged a debate between him and Yuri Dan. Yuri Dan was one of the closest advisors to Ariel Sharon, who people will remember was like a Netanyahu. And to get him to do the show, I'm on a phone conversation with Dan, and he's trying to suss out where I'm at on these things to see if he wants to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, my sister lived on a kibbutz for, 10, 11 years. Her kids grew up in Israel, which is true. So he's thinking, oh, okay, this guy's with me. And then he says, well, what did you think of Israel? Because I told him I'd visited there. And I said, oh, it's a beautiful country. It's so beautiful. Of course, I was talking about the geography, not an apartheid system.
Right.
Anyway, he figured I was with him. So he started talking to me very openly. And he said, if it takes 1,000 years and 1,000 Jewish lives every year, someday, from the river to the sea, all of this will be ours. That's the first time I ever heard that slogan, from the river to the sea, which makes it kind of ironic that it became a slogan for Palestinians. I hate the slogan, whichever side it comes from, but that's what they want. They want to diminish and eliminate Palestinian presence as much as they can. It may not be a realistic plan, but I was at a film festival in Tel Aviv. I submitted this is my wrestling film.
Oh, okay. Which is, I'll tell the audience, watch it. It is very good.
Yeah, it's on the Analysis website in the documentary section.
Okay.
And so I wasn't even going to go because, I don't know, I didn't feel right going to an Israeli film festival. But anyway, I asked, are there any Palestinians coming? And it turned out there were. There was like about 10 Palestinian filmmakers were coming to it. It's a small independent festival. So I figured, okay, if they're coming, I'll go. And I was told there, and this is back in like 98, I guess, that if it wasn't for the threat of Palestinian existence at the time, there wasn't much terrorism left, but there had been some. But if it wasn't for that, Israeli society would break out into civil war between the Orthodox versus the secular. That the secular population was absolutely fed up with the amount of power Orthodox rabbis had over normal everyday life, including how people get married and a whole range of things. They resented that Orthodox boys and girls didn't have to join the military. It was but as long as there's an external threat there, they're able to keep this down to some extent. So the agenda of the Israeli elites is the status quo or more, diminish. And how would one think, if you cause such suffering in Gaza, that there won't be a response? So sometimes people ask me what I think of Hamas, and my answer usually is, I think the apartheid Israeli system is the underlying cancer. Hamas is a malignant tumor produced by that cancer. And you can't talk about the tumor if you don't talk about the cancer. And that's more or less what mainstream Western media and governments and so on, what happened on October 7th is a terrorist attack on civilians. Mm-hmm. What Hamas must have figured, the response would be devastating on the Palestinian population in Gaza, and apparently they didn't give a shit. Maybe, it's maybe what they wanted. So history didn't begin on October 7th, obviously.
Right.
But history didn't begin in 1948, because there is another side to this.
True.
Which is, several thousand years of the hatred of Jewish people. Mm-hmm. It weighs on the brains of many living Jews like a nightmare. So that can't be discounted either. And if I'd still been, in Ukraine, and, in theory, it wouldn't have been me, but whoever, probably, most of my Ukrainian family that was left, my Jewish Ukrainian family, didn't get out. Mm-hmm. They'd all be dead. And it doesn't weigh on my brain as much because I grew up in Toronto and I didn't experience that much anti-Semitism, but many people did. And so you can't discount how that affects people. But of course, it's no justification for the Israeli state and elites to do the same thing to the Palestinians as was done to the Jews. And dehumanization of Palestinians that is done in Israel, the extent of the racist feelings towards Palestinians. And when I was there last, about, 11, 12 years ago, I was just astounded how openly racist storekeepers and others were.
In Israel?
Yeah, in Israel towards Palestinians, just open.
Right. Because they have Arabs are
Yeah, Palestinians, that the
or some
Israelis
citizens
Arabs,
of
but they're Palestinians.
Palestinians. There's some that are citizens of Israel.
Oh yeah, well, more than 1 million, I think.
That's right, and that's what they were worried about.
They're very second-class citizens too. They claim they're citizens, but
Right.
all kinds of restrictions on Palestinian Israelis that don't exist on Jewish. Including the right of return. Any Jew in the world has the right to go immigrate back to Israel. It's not true for Palestinians.
Oh, isn't that true? And there's houses that were taken over by people from Israel that were Palestinians.
750,000 Palestinians were expelled in 48. But let's step back a bit here.
Okay.
You can't judge any of these situations without also looking at internationally, why is this geopolitics as it is? And you can't look at this without looking at how global monopoly capitalism works. And the fundamental thing about monopoly capitalism is the first word. Capitalism seeks monopoly. Whether it's, Pepsi versus Coke, if it's at the corporate level, you seek as much market share as you possibly can. And if you can possibly completely dominate a market, you do. The way Google, to a large extent, dominates the online advertising. But that happens at the nation state level too. It's an expression of the same, that nation states, to the extent they can, try to monopolize. Now, only the United States, and this is because of objective historical development, not because, capitalists in the U.S. are, somehow worse than others. They had the opportunity to become a global hegemon. Now, there is some specificity to the U.S., which makes it particularly violent. It's a country that was founded on the genocide of Native people, slave system, and then transitioning to a kind of foreign power, imperial power in the late 19th century. It fought a civil war. The issues were settled between rising monopoly capitalism, not monopoly at the time, industrial capitalism versus the slave system. It's been a very, very violent society, which makes it somehow, I don't know, more acceptable for this society to commit crimes abroad. I mean, you can't, there's nothing comes close since World War II. You go through the wars and hundreds of thousands and millions, really, of people that have been killed in wars instigated by the U.S. in order to maintain a global dominance. And somehow that winds up, acceptable to most Americans. And even when it's not, it quickly fades into memory. I mean, the Iraq War, just an out-and-out blatant grab for oil and some advantage in the region, which both blew up in their face. They didn't get either advantage in the region. They didn't even wind up with control of the oil, but it made a lot of money for arms companies along the way, including Cheney's Halliburton. But
he did.
But that said, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict has to be seen in the position that if the U.S. is going to be a global hegemon, it has to be a hegemon in every region, or then you're just a region. Let's say your only power is in Latin America. Well, then you're a regional hegemon. But they want to be a global hegemon. So you got to, and they have been very successful more or less successful, dominating, although I must say not dominating as much as some of the left suggests. Like, they try to become the global hegemon, but they've lost every major war they've been in since World War II. I mean, what did they win? Grenada. Even Korean War, at best you could say it ended up as a stalemate. They didn't really get what they wanted. It's the overthrow of the North Korean government.
We got some good movies out of that Grenada War too. So
yeah, so within the system, which is based on seeking monopoly, each of these bigger powers that has the capability try to become as much dominant in their region, and then you get the odd one that has because of history, geography, has the possibility to be a global hegemon. And for them, that means Israel is one of the levers of power, or at least has been, in the Middle East.
It's financed quite a bit by the USA. I mean, billions of dollars, armaments.
Oh yeah, it wouldn't
survive.
Well, unless they go make a deal with somebody else. I don't know.
They might have to get along with their neighbors then, if they didn't have the billions of dollars. But.
Well, yeah, but they call Israel a land-based aircraft carrier for the U.S. and it has atomic weapons, so it's there to threaten the rise of any kind of popular nationalist movements, which, like Nasser, Israeli, in fact, Israel did get involved in the Suez Crisis against Nasser.
Right.
Now, there's some debate in American foreign policy circles whether it's still advantageous or is it more of a liability, Israel. But as long as they can work out deals between the Israeli state and the Saudis and Emirates and those, that creates a fabric of alliances that are pro-U.S. But even there, they're not totally in control. China started to develop good relations with the Saudis and brokered the deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So the Americans strive for global hegemony, and in financial terms, they do. They've been quite successful using the CIA covertly. Their actual military footprint has been far less successful. But part of the logic of being a global hegemon to defend democracy around the world and liberal values, American values, which I'd love someone to explain to me what those values are, but justifies all the expense. And the power and lobbying power of the military-industrial complex, the lobbying power of the nuclear weapons complex is profound. Because, I'll say this quickly, but if you want, ask me another follow-up, I can go into it more. From the very beginning of U.S. industrial capitalism and the very beginnings of the role of finance, financialization, which means the growth and importance and dominance of big banks, has evolved right alongside militarization. And it starts at the very least from the Civil War. The J.P. Morgan Bank grew out of selling, buying Union Army bonds, government bonds, and selling weapons to the Union Army, even though it was outright corrupt. Buy rifles for $2.25 and sell them for $22. I mean, even there, the war profiteering was terrible. But out of that grew the Morgan Bank. So this marriage between financialization and militarization being one of the most important pillars of the U.S. economy has not changed.
That's true. But I would also put in that Anglo-American, right? The British had quite the interest in the Mideast, especially British Petroleum with Mossadegh in Iran, right? So they have, again, it's the capitalists have their fingers in the pie and stirring it up.
Yeah, well, I mean, the British, if it's not, listen, you and I are both living in Canada.
Yay.
Canada they'd be the global hegemon. If somehow through some historical, geographical opportunity, a bigger population, and this isn't something particularly just unique about American elites. It's how it developed. But all the capitalist elites would love to be the global hegemon, and the Canadians are very happy to ride on the U.S. gravy train, even though, a lot of times Canadians like to have some moral outrage about one thing or another. But it's skin deep because our arms industry is totally integrated with the American arms industry.
Well, we'd be kinder and gentler power control.
No, we wouldn't.
Of the world. Yeah.
No, yeah. Oh, yeah, because we treated Indigenous people in Canada so nicely.
We'd be polite about it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Now we wouldn't even be polite. I don't even know where that came from. It's so nonsensical. Watch Canadian hockey players. They beat the shit out of each other.